Welcome to ZT22 Films. Today, we delve into the shocking story of King George III, the British monarch who descended into madness, turning his life and the entire royal family into a haunting tragedy. King George III was a respected and diligent monarch who reigned for almost 60 years. However, he is, rather unfairly, mostly remembered for his descent into madness during the final years of his life. The first indication that something was wrong with King George III came in the spring of 1765. The 27-year-old monarch had been on the throne for just 5 years when he came down with a fever, a racking cough, sudden weight loss and insomnia. Alongside these symptoms came something unexpected, a noticeable cognitive impairment that caused concern not just among the king's courtiers, but also to the king himself. So much so that an act of parliament was passed to install a regency should George be incapacitated in such a fashion again. Thankfully, the king quickly recovered, and the act was repealed. Violent mania. George's second bout of illness in 1788 was far worse than the first. Whereas before George had displayed mild mental distress, this time around he was struck down with full-blown mania. Residing in Windsor Castle at the time, the king's behavior quickly spiraled out of control. He became extremely rude to everyone around him, he suffered from hallucinations, he started talking non-stop gibberish for hours at a time, and he began to make inappropriate advances towards women, even attempting several sexual assaults. He also suffered violent fits, convulsions so bad that servants had to pin him to the floor to prevent him from injuring himself. A raving lunatic. George's family and staff were mystified. This amiable, polite family man had turned into a raving lunatic. A visitor to Windsor was astonished to witness George burying a stake in the grounds of the castle, believing it would grow into a beef tree. Another saw the king trying to shake hands with an oak tree, believing it to be the King of Prussia. George's equerry, Robert Greville, was one of many to observe the king's bizarre behavior up close. In his journal, Greville recalled how George spent Christmas Day 1788.
He had at this time his part of the bedclothes under his bed, had taken off his nightcap, and got a pillowcase round his head, and the pillow was in the bed with him, which he called Prince Octavius, who he said was to be newborn this day.
Confined to Kew Palace. George was moved from his apartments at Windsor to Dutch House in the grounds of the long-since demolished Kew Palace in London. There, his physicians tried and failed to cure him of his insanity with several treatments we would now consider a form of torture. These included applying arsenic-laden powders to the king's skin to make it burn and blister, starving him, and plunging him into freezing cold water. The king was also given emetics to make him vomit and purgatives to give him diarrhea. All these treatments were meant to draw out the king's madness and restore him to health. Unsurprisingly, they didn't work. Wrong heads. Beside herself with worry, Queen Charlotte turned to Francis Willis. Willis was a provincial physician and clergyman who had come to national attention after successfully treating what were then known as wrong heads in his own private asylum in Lincolnshire. Willis believed that the root cause of mental illness was overexcitement. He intended to cure the king by strictly controlling his behavior. Harsh treatments. When George ranted and raved and attacked those attending him, Willis ordered the king's servants to gag him and place him in a straitjacket. He was left that way, thrashing around and making incomprehensible noises until he tired himself out and calmed down. When the king behaved himself, he was rewarded by being allowed to see members of his family. When he misbehaved, it was back into the straitjacket. Even mealtimes became a carrot and stick exercise. When George was bad, he ate mushed up food with a wooden spoon. When he was good, he was allowed to use cutlery. Recovery. The king slowly began to recover under Willis's care, though it is debatable whether the physician's methods contributed to his recovery. By 1789, George was completely back to normal. For his part in the king's recovery, Willis was awarded £1,500 a year for 21 years. Willis returned to Lincolnshire and opened a second asylum at Shellingthorpe Hall where more patients could be treated with his, for the time, cutting-edge techniques. Relapse. Alas, the king's recovery was not to last. In 1801 and again in 1804 he suffered further relapses and was again confined to Dutch House. He recovered from both relapses, but it was clear that the king's mental and physical health was deteriorating. The final blow came in 1810. Already almost totally blind due to cataracts, the king suffered a final catastrophic mental breakdown that left him permanently insane. For the last 10 years of his reign, he cut a sad and lonely figure, wandering the corridors of Windsor Castle, a ghostly figure dressed in soiled clothes with a long flowing beard. When his beloved wife Charlotte died in 1818, George had no idea who she was and did not mourn her. Death. King George III died on the 29th of January, 1820 at the age of 81. He had reigned for 60 years and remains to this day the longest-serving male monarch in British history. Only his niece Victoria and his descendant Elizabeth II would go on to reign for longer.